Hello viewers, myself is Dr. Neeta and you are watching my channel Learn Literature with Dr. Neeta. So let us begin today's topic.
Hello dear students, today we would learn about postcolonialism, which is also the part of literary theory. Postcolonialism is an umbrella term and in which you would learn a number of concepts. So let us begin postcolonialism. So prior to learning postcolonialism, you must have the concept of colonialism. So during 19th century, Great Britain was the largest colonizer and the imperial power that controlled a number of countries of the world. As we were also the part of the colony of Britishers during 19th century, and we got freedom in 1947, as all of you know are aware about it. So it was not with India only, rather a number of countries were under the colonialship of Britain, and it was the time of 18th and 19th century. It was the time when Britishers began to believe that Great Britain was destined to rule the world and the British people were biologically superior to the other races of the world. So what happened during that colonial period? Britishers were controlling a number of countries and they started to think that Great Britain was destined to rule the world, that it was the destiny of Britain that she has to rule whole of the world. And they made a concept that British people were biologically superior. They considered themselves superior, and as they considered themselves superior, and that is why they thought that they have got every right to reign over whole of the public of this world, the different nations. So there was a sense of superiority, one thing you should keep in mind, and they thought themselves to be the ruler. And on the other hand, what was the condition of the people who were colonized, who were living in those countries which were the colonies of Britain? Those people were considered inferior and often they were given petty and menial jobs to be performed. The status of the colonized people was like that of a servant, slaves, or the forced laborer. This was the condition also in India. Britishers never considered Indians to be at the equal level to themselves, either at the cultural level or at the economic level. At any level, they were not considered equal to the Britishers. In some of the nations, such a subhuman treatment of these colonized people led to the commercialization of the institution of the slavery. And people of Africa, they were also considered inferior by these people, and they were treated like slaves. So it was during the colonial period. The culture of the colonized people was also thought as inferior to that of colonizer. As far as the culture is concerned, the culture of the colonized people was considered inferior, and the Britishers imposed their culture on the colonized people. So this was the condition of England at that time. I have just put a few countries who were under the domination of England at that time. India is also there. See this one. India was also under the domination of England, and apart from that, a number of countries were there who were under the domination of England during colonial period. Now, try to understand the journey from colonialism to post-colonialism. What happened? That was the condition up to 19th century. But there was a change in the perception with the beginning of the 20th century. England's domination began to go down, not only at the political and economic level, but also at the social and ideological level. So, revolt began in the different colonies of England, and England's domination began to go down. at all levels, whether it was political or economic or social or ideological level. Gradually, the countries fought for their freedom. All the countries who were under the domination of England, they tried to set themselves free, and they fought for their freedom and gained independence. Gradually, one by one, the countries got independence. So in this chain, India too got freedom in 1947. Normally, the term post-colonialism refers to the period since 1945. The period after 1945 is normally considered the post-colonial period, because up to now there were a number of countries who got freedom, and some of the countries were trying to set themselves free from the clutches of British imperialism, when numerous colonies began to gain independence from British dominance. So now, what is post-colonialism? So what happened during that period? A number of scholars, writers and critics concerning the social, moral, political and economic conditions of once colonized countries began to write about this changing scenario. So the different countries were fighting for their freedom, or they achieved their freedom after much disputed conditions. So these conditions were seen by these scholars, writers and critics, and they were interested in the social, moral and economic conditions of these colonized countries just before they achieved their freedom. So they began to write about this changing scenario, which later on began to be called the post-colonial literature. It means the literature which was produced just after they got freedom, and that literature became the post-colonial literature, which was given by the writers or the poets, or if it was given by some critics, the criticism of those political, social and moral condition, then this became the post-colonial theory or discourse. So post-colonialism is not a very simple term, rather it is a heterogeneous approach. Heterogeneous approach meaning thereby it may be seen from the angle of social setup, morality, political mapping and the economic conditions, the psychological condition. It means post-colonialism is such a term which can be seen from the different angles. Apart from that, it is also heterogeneous because colonialism was the part of a number of countries. So when they got freedom from the British rule, they reacted, or they expressed their feelings, expressed their experiences in their own way. The people of one country were describing their experiences and their attitudes towards colonialism in one way. The people of other countries were expressing their experience and attitude in their own way. So different people from the different countries expressed their attitudes and views and their experiences of colonialism from different perspectives. And whole of that, the various diverse perspectives of these people and theories that collectively question the legacy of colonialism is called post-colonialism. As I told you in the very beginning of this video, that post-colonialism is not a simple term. It is a heterogeneous term, a heterogeneous approach rather should I say, because it is including different perspectives, social, moral, political, economic, psychological, and the perspectives of the different people of the various nationalities. And all of this is there in post-colonialism. For example, we may understand that South Africa was also the colony of Britishers. So the experiences of the South Africans regarding the colonial dominance of England were a little bit different from what is there in the at Indian subcontinent. So Indians having their own experiences, South Africans having own experiences, the different people from the different countries were having their different experiences regarding colonialism, and all those approaches are cumulatively called the post-colonialism. What happened during the colonial period? Different cultures were subverted, conquered, and removed from the history during the colonial period. Each and every nation, before it was dominated by England's supremacy, was having its own culture. But that culture was subverted, conquered, and sometimes it was removed from the history by the Britishers. So this has also happened with Indian culture also. It was subverted by the Britishers. Postcolonialism records these attacks, how these Britishers attacked the countries and try to subvert or conquer or remove the culture. All those attacks were recorded in colonialism, how they tried to brutally crush the culture, the native culture of those people, and highlights multiple responses of colonized people. Multiple responses means the people from different countries are having their different responses, how their culture was brutally crushed by the Britishers, and all these records are studied under post-colonialism. Now, a very simple question, what post-colonialism discusses? So, it is therefore no single approach to post-colonial theory is possible. If we are trying to understand post-colonialism, so we cannot apply a single approach, because single approach would show merely a partial picture of post-colonialism, because post-colonialism can be understood from the different perspectives, from different angles. So now post-colonialism often also involves, these are the major three things which we study in post-colonialism. So post-colonialism is the discussion on the experiences of the colonized people, such as suppression, slavery, migration, discrimination based on race, gender, etc. So the texts which were discussing the experiences of the colonized people of those countries. So they were suppressed by the Britishers, they were made slaves, they were compelled to migrate, they were discriminated on the basis of race and gender, and the discussion on all these things is there in post-colonialism. Similarly, discussion on various modes of resistance. When they were suppressed, discriminated, so definitely there was a kind of resistance in those people. How they resisted those suppressing activities of Britishers, it was also discussed under this title of post-colonialism. Apart from that, the responses to the discourses of imperial Europe, such as history, philosophy, and linguistics. So, you should keep in mind that when Britishers came to our country, or they reached to the different countries of the world, they tried to jot down history according to their own aspects. They tried to put history in their own mold. They tried to influence the philosophy of the people. They made the desired changes in the history, philosophy, and linguistics of that country. So the responses of those theorists or critics who were thinking against this suppressive attitude of Europe was also understood under the heading of post-colonialism. So post-colonialism is such a big term under which a number of things are going to be studied. Here in this video, I am just giving you in a nutshell the comprehensive idea of post-colonialism, so that you may very well understand the concept of post-colonialism, but its detail would be discussed later on with the names of the critics in my later videos. Now, what is post-colonial literature? Initially, post-colonial literature was penned by the writers of Britain's former colonies in the Caribbean, Africa, and India. The people from Caribbean, African, it means the Caribbean, African and Indian people wrote something about the British rule, the cruelty done by the Britishers in the different fields in English, because it was the plan of Britishers that they imposed English on each and every colony. So the initial post-colonial literature was written or penned by the writers in English. Most of them wrote in English and dealt with the common themes. So whether they are belonging to Africa or they are belonging to India or Caribbean country, they were having the common themes. So what were those themes? So they expressed their struggle for independence. They were trying to get freedom from the British rule. So how they made a struggle for that, that was penned by the people, and that came into the category of post-colonial literature. Immigration, national identity. So obviously when they were having the feeling of national identity, only then their struggle would have been successful. So how they made their national identity, how they suffered discrimination, how they suffered the subhuman attitude of the colonized. Post-colonial writings attempt to bring to light the historical backdrop of the colonized and presents the history according to the colonized perspective. As I told you, that history, philosophy and linguistics, everything was molded according to their own mold by Britishers. So when the countries got freedom, the people from the different countries tried to revive their history according to the perspective of their own. So the history also changed, philosophy changed, linguistics changed after they got freedom. So when you are going to study post-colonial literature or post-colonial theory, some significant terms you would get familiar, and these terms are there like marginalization, identity, multiculturalism, hybridity, mimicry, migration, other spaces, etc. And these terms I would take up one by one in my further videos when we are discussing these terms along with the critics of post-colonial literature. Now here are a few significant critics of post-colonialism. Postcolonialism attracted the attention of the West with the publication of Adversaries Orientalism. So this was the text which made an impact on the West. So this text, Orientalism by Edward Said, that was published in 1798, exposed how Western scholarship perpetuated stereotypes and constructed a distorted view of the East. How strategically Western scholarship tried to prove that East is inferior and West is superior. So this has been exposed at length in Adversaries Orientalism. His critics motivated a scholar to examine the power dynamics inherent in representation of the other. Other means here the Eastern. West considered itself and other were the East people. So how the people from the West were representing the East. So, and how much wrong they were in their perceptions and in their views, that has been exposed in Adversaries Orientalism. I have also prepared a video on Adversaries Orientalism. You may go through it and understand what is there in this book. Another famous critic of post-colonial era is Frantz Fanon. His book, The Wretched of the Earth, explores the psychological and cultural impact of colonization on the colonized. So this book is exposing how psychologically and culturally Western people affected the colonized. It means what were the traumas felt by the colonized, how their culture was crushed by the colonized, and how it affected the identity of the native people of a particular country. This has been described by Fanon in his book The Wretched of the Earth. Yet another famous critic is Homi K. Bhabha. His Location of Culture, that was published in 1994, introduced the concept of hybridity and explored the spaces of cultural negotiation between colonizer and colonized. So he has given this term hybridity because when the people of the West came to our country, or they went to the different country and make those countries their colonies, there was a kind of hybridity. It means the culture of Western and the culture of East, they mixed together sometimes, and the thing that came out was of hybrid nature. Something was there of Indian taste, something of the Western taste, and a hybrid kind of culture was there. So we would discuss this term in detail when we are going to learn Homi K. Bhabha. So this was he was talking about the concept of hybridity, and his ideas on third space influence discussion on cultural identity and representation. Basically his ideas are related to culture, and he also talked about the concept of third space. Another famous critic is Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, and one of her essays is quite famous, and that is Can Subaltern Speak? It examined the representation of marginalized voices, including women, within post-colonial discourse. So she was talking about subaltern. Subaltern we would discuss in detail when we are going to discuss Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, but here you can understand subaltern are the marginalized section of the people. So basically she talked about a number of marginalized voices, but she has given stress on the voices of women, and this work is quite a famous work, and for which she has got a famous place in post-colonial critics. Her work emphasizes the need to raise the voice of subaltern groups. Through her works, she tried to motivate people so that they may raise the voice of the subaltern people and change the essentialist view of identity, so that they may get their own identity. Essentialist views of identity, we would discuss it later on, but at least here you may understand that she inspired people to raise the voices of subaltern groups so that they may resume or get their identity. Ngugi Wa Thiong, he was an African critic. His book Decolonizing the Mind highlights the linguistic dimensions. His work is very famous for the linguistic dimensions of post-colonialism. He argues for the importance of decolonizing the language as a means of reclaiming cultural identity. He was of the view that if someone wants to retain or reclaim the cultural identity, decolonization of language is also essential, because when the people from Britain came and colonized us, they have also colonized at the level of language also. So it is very essential to decolonize language, because it is one of the most important and significant means to reclaim the cultural identity of the people of the particular country, and resisting the continuing influence of colonial structure. Without it, it would not be possible to regain the identity, cultural identity. So thanks for your patience listening. I think you would be having a broad perspective of post-colonialism. In my next videos, we would learn the different terms given by the different critics related to post-colonial theory. So thanks for your patience listening.